Hi, good afternoon to where you are. Welcome back to our presentation, our sessions. Right now, we will be beginning this panel number 5 on the Islam and transnational connections in China. And originally, we have scheduled 2 presenters this panel, but one of the presenter unfortunately has some personal issues at the last minute and cannot make it. So this afternoon in this session, we will have just one presenter, Dr. Meizhen, and and then we will have plenty of time for discussions. We'll follow just the protocol as dictated here. 15 minutes for the presenter and 15 minutes for the discussants. I will introduce the presenters and the topic, and then after her presentation, then I will introduce the discussants and also her responses. And if you have any questions, I appreciate that you will type it up in the chat room so that we can do it by the order, and we can also have a chance to look at the question first by the presenter or the discussant or anyone on the floor. Right now, we will have the presentation by Dr. Meizhen, who had a very rich background on this topic, being educated both in China and also Hong Kong, and also in Australia to get her doctorate. And she had been working with the Chinese Muslims in the context of the transnationalities from anthropological perspective. Right now, she's working at the African Studies Institutes at the Zhejiang Normal Universities. Dr. Wen, the time is yours. Looking forward to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chan. Now I will share my PowerPoint now. Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry. Firstly, I wanted to thank all the faculties and the staffs to organize this wonderful conference. I learned a lot from previous the presenters, the paper. Today, my topic is money is the everything in effective Islamic constraints in the labor markets. I did my field work in Hyeju city. Hyeju was located in the middle part of Zhejiang province in eastern China. All the data for this paper were mainly collected in 2050 to 2060, last 12 months. After that, I revisited this city every year, and then to follow up all the life of my interviewers. And Hyeju was very famous for its small commodities. Actually, it was called the largest small commodities wholesale market in the world. Because of this market, it attracted a lot of business people, both from China and out of China. And also, this market attracted business people from the Middle East and the North Africa. So a lot of people from that migrants from the Middle East and North Africa are Muslims. And this new phenomenon of the influx of both foreign and Chinese Muslims into EU was a result of the success of export business to the Middle East and North Africa, home to the large number of Muslims. The arrival of Arab business who were Muslims create many job opportunities for Chinese Hui Muslims, who predominantly work as Mandarin Arabic interpreters, while others, mainly self-employed, run the halal restaurants, establish import and export companies and the wholesale store. A smaller number of Chinese Muslims were involved in less significant activities, such as exchanging money in underground markets and selling SIM cards on the street. The Mandarin Arabic interpreters play a key role in connecting the Chinese Muslim and the Arabic Muslim communities. Although there were two main groups of language interpreters in the market, namely Mandarin English interpreters and the Mandarin Arabic interpreters. The Mandarin Arabic interpreters was most popular and the most important. This was particularly the cases in the late 1990s, when the majority of Arab traders arriving in China spoke only Arabic and were dependent on Chinese Mandarin Arabic Muslim interpreters for the conduct of their business with the Chinese. The high demand for Mandarin Arabic interpreters inspired a large number of Hui Muslims, predominantly from northwest China, where was the traditional Muslim concentrated areas flooding into Yiwu. The majority of these were males in their 20s and 30s who attended language classes held either in the mosque or private Arabic language training school. While some graduates from universities in the Middle East and North Africa, their ability in Chinese and Arabic, as well as the shared Islamic faith, ensure their appeal to Arab traders and sought them taking full advantages of opportunities presented in the labor market. For the Hui ethnic group was one of the 55 ethnic groups classified as minorities in China. They constitute a majority, or at best a very sizable minority, in areas of the northwest of China, such as Ningxia Hui Autonomous Area, Gansu, Qinghai, and the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous. According to the sixth census, there were 6.3 million in Ningxia, and around 13% was Hui minority, mainly congregate in Wuzhong City and Guyuan City. Actually, for this paper, most of my interviews are from Wuzhong City. The population of Hui minority in Gansu and Xinjiang was almost over 1 million. I believe that in Islam is an essential component of Hui ethnic identity and differentiates them from the majority Han Chinese population. Because inspired by the demand for labor in coastal city, more families send their children to mosque on Arabic language schools to learn Arabic. The learning of the Arabic language for commercial purpose had its origin in Ningxia, from where it spread into other Hui concentrated areas. Ningxia, it has been seen, supplied the largest number of interpreters to Yiwu, most from the middle part of Ningxia, such as Wuzhong City and Lingwu City. So for what kind of work for this Hui interpreters do? Actually, the Hui minority interpreters, they have they mainly assist Arab business people both in business and the personal issue. Because I mentioned that the personal issues, because for their job is not just focused on their office. For the personal issues, sometimes they had to help their employees to pick up children from local school, went to hospital with their Arab employees. So for the business parts, their work was divided in two parts. One part is in office. Other part is the out of office. In the office part, they mainly search goods online because for this interpreters, the buyers from the Middle East and the North Africans, sometimes they didn't come to China. They just sent pictures to these Arab buyers in middlemen in Yiwu, and then these interpreters had to search the products online first before they go to the market, and then they can compare prices and search out the different prices, and then send back to the buyers in the Middle East and North Africa. And after all the products, they had to compile the list, send to custom for the clearance. Actually, for these interpreters, they spend more time out of office. Because when the buyers visit China, especially visit EU, they had to guide these buyers to markets, to the factories local in different parts of China. And then they for these interpreters, they had to do more works to visit different places in China. It means that they couldn't follow the rules inside the office. It's totally different from that's the regulations in the factories that other scholars talk about how to regulate rural to urban migrants in the factories. Because of time, I will not discuss these parts here. So for this, interpreters, they didn't follow the rules in the office, rather than out of office when they conduct these buyers in Canton Fair or in the factories from other part of China. It means that they have the more time to spend with the buyers and with Chinese suppliers. So how did these Hui interpreters had that job opportunity in the markets? The main reason is that they have the co-ethic and they also are co-religionist. So these Arab employers and these Hui employees, they consider they are family and they are good brothers. So they always use this kind of words when they work together. It's rather than very strict employment relationships in their office. It means the family. It means that even though they are practiced in different ways in religion, they are from different parts of the religion, but they are still consider they are family rather than they are employer and the employee, the relations between these two parts. And so they are also considered they are good brothers. Here, the good brothers means they can share something that is different from their daily work. For example, in the Arab business people's office, sometimes many of them, they have a small room, and in the room they play together and read the Quran together, and they discuss a lot about the religion. So daily Islamic practice is very common in the office. This is totally different from that as a Han interpreters who are not familiar with Islamic practice. So for one of my interviewers said that they also employ the Han interpreters, but for these Han people, they couldn't understand what this kind of the daily Islamic practice for them. And for the Arab employees, sometimes they also couldn't explain why they had to did this kind of the behaviors in their daily times. So for these Hui minority migrants, even though they are considered have the disadvantages in their the labor markets, because they didn't get a very good educations in comparing with the Han people, and they also from the very far past like Northwest China, and some of them couldn't speak Mandarin very well, but they still, because of the co-religious behavior, and they are co-ethics. They get a lot of advantages in the labor market. So the boundaries between the employers and the employers it's not very clearly. For some of my interviewers, they can borrow money from their boss, and if they need help, they also ask for some help from their employers. For this part, there is not the boundary between the employees and the employers. It's not very clearly. It's not like in the factories. They are hierarchies in the office. So for this way, because they benefit a lot of from the labor markets, and they have opportunities to settle down in EU and bring their families to EU when they have the job in the EU. This picture shows that some interpreters from Ningxia, Wuzhong, and then they gather in EU. We can see their family also went to EU together. But even though they consider very good brothers and on families in the labor markets, but this need a very high trust between in the employment relationship. Actually, for this Hui minority interpreters, they still did some behaviors that consider as honest in the labor markets, especially for these two behaviors. One is taking kickbacks in the labor markets. For one of the Arab employers said there are no clean hands among the Muslim interpreters. Not clean hands, it means that almost all the interpreters in the markets, they take kickbacks in the markets. Why they did this kind of work? The main reason is that Hui interpreters in the market is not just work as interpreters. They are also the guarantors for the trading models, because in the EU markets, that they are not doing business in cash, rather than they just need to pay the part of the money, and then after they selling all the goods in their home country, and then set back the rest of the money to the Chinese buyers. And for this model, the Chinese interpreters, they are play as the interpreters, and was taking very high risks in their work. And for other reasons is that because these interpreters, they are very...
Excuse me, there will be 2 more minutes. There will be...
sorry.
Yes, yeah.
And,
yeah. Okay.
And I will go faster. And then they have a lot of opportunities to communicate with Chinese suppliers, and so they can do something dishonest behaviors, like taking kickbacks and stealing customers. These behaviors. So for this kind of the behaviors, that the Arab employees, they couldn't just use the Islamic religions to regulate the Chinese interpreters' behaviors, and they had to balance the modern economy and the Islamic way of life. So they combined the Islamic ethic and the knowledge to enhance Islamic piety, become a strategy to regular interpret the activities. And also, when Islamic virtues failed to make Muslim self-disciplines, accountabilities, and entrepreneurial actions, Arab businessmen altered their approach to use secular management. For this conclusion, that why the Chinese Hui they couldn't follow all the religious regulations because their lives are full of anxieties and uncertainties. They concerns more about the better life rather than afterlife. Their employees always talk to them. And also, Chinese Muslim interpreters consume Islam rather than believe in Islam. That the third reason is that I just mentioned, better life in the city or better life for their family are more important than whether they will receive the punishment from the afterlife for this Hui interpreters. Because of time, maybe we can discuss more about this my papers in discussion part. Yeah, these are my presentation contents.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wen, for your very rich presentation. And your paper is a very long one, so you have a lot of rich materials to cover. And you've done very well to summarize for us. And we're looking forward for more discussions later on. And right now we have our discussants, Dr. Hyeju Jeong, Zheng Weizhu. She was educated in two universities, did a lot of works and field work about the Chinese Muslims, Shanghai, and different places. And now she's at the Göttingen universities. And now the time is yours for your responding discussions and for 15 minutes. Thank you very much, and looking forward for your responses.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much, Dr. Wan, for the great presentation and the pre-circulated paper. The paper which I am basing my comments on has really fascinating and rare, rich materials. So I very much enjoyed reading it as a person who has worked primarily on Chinese Muslim, transnational political and diaspora networks, but with a focus on the 20th century. So I'll begin with, let me just begin with what particularly struck me as exciting. I think the great strength of the paper and the rich ethnographic data is in how it unravels the collaborative and conflicted relationships between and within different actor groups. These include Chinese Muslim intermediaries, who you have highlighted in the presentation, Arab traders and buyers, who mostly seem to be Muslims, as well as non-Muslim Chinese suppliers and non-Muslim Chinese staff, who are both men and increasingly women, which you discuss more in the paper, but I think you didn't have time to incorporate it in the presentation. So these different groups are connected with one another because they have a shared interest to keep the chain of trade going. That chain of trade is transnationally dispersed, but your paper and the presentation and your research zooms into the particular hub of EU, which has emerged as the prime marketplace for peddling wholesale traders. Again, what's so fascinating about the paper is that it pays careful attention to how the different social groups who have their own networks and identifications and connections with places that are distant from EU, including Wuzhong and other parts of Ningxia, how these social groups who have different connections and who are not indigenously locals in EU have interacted with one another, and these are people who have made investments to become locals in this very unique transnational node. So through attention to that unique place, the paper is able to raise questions of power and hierarchy, depending on who has the monetary capital, like the Arab buyers, or cultural or linguistic capital, such as the Chinese Muslim intermediaries, perceived religious authority, as you mentioned, the Arab traders and middlemen and buyers trying to regulate their employees' behaviors, and who has the means to define or shape narratives on gender. So it's a very rich material that highlights these collaborative and conflicted relations between the different groups with different interests. So moving forward, I will just raise 3 suggestions and questions. The first, the primary group that the paper focuses on is Chinese Muslim interpreters in interaction with others. And my suggestion or question would be whether you would be interested to further develop the concept of middlemen or mobile middlemen to position Chinese Muslims rather than as a minority with religious or cultural resources or capital. So I understand from the paper and the presentation that the roles of Chinese Muslim interpreters go much more beyond linguistic interpretation, which is really interesting. But they gather information and arrange buying and selling, negotiate prices, and deal with also stocking and shipping. Because they're the middlemen who make things possible, they need to be collaborated with from both Chinese suppliers and Arab middlemen. But if things go wrong, they can be abandoned and criticized from both sides. So this position of working as an intermediary, in my opinion, is not something that comes automatically from being a Muslim or being a part of a minority, but it's something that results from particular individual investments and decisions, and through efforts to make and maintain educational and kinship networks between northwestern China and eastern China and outside China, as the paper shows at different points. So if they are thought of as middlemen at the forefront, I think there's much more space to engage with also the historical literature on how Chinese Muslims have historically played positions or played roles as trade diasporas during the Mongol period, for instance, as people have shown, and how their position as middlemen has been remade in the age of globalization. And I have references to just suggest, perhaps at a later point. I think Dr. Xiang Biao has been working from this perspective on Yiwu and Guangzhou. And secondly, I think the place of and role of religion or Islam in shaping relations between Chinese Muslims and their Arab employers need to be fleshed out more. So a central argument of the paper seems to be that the Arab employers try to regulate Chinese Muslims' behavior by assuming positions as religiously superior group, which is ultimately not successful. So it may be the case that the employers condemn their employees in God's name when they run into practices that they see as dishonest or corrupt. But how much of that language is a coping mechanism or a rhetoric, or an action, or is it really an effort to actually regulate employees' behaviors through Islamic morals? It's not wholly clear to me or convincing. And the employees or Chinese Muslims may be using the similar tactics or the religious language against their Arab employers when they run into issues of dishonesty or fleeing into their home countries, as you mentioned in the paper. So I wonder if you might want to instead look deeper into how religious spaces such as mosques or schools have been commercialized or served the purposes for providing a space of interactions between different groups of traders who are interested in commerce and marketplace. And these kinds of commercialized spaces is something that even the local governments in Ningxia and probably Yiwu could tap into and utilize for their own purposes. And another potential direction for religion or placing religion would be to focus on how the contradictory uses or to focus on the contradictory uses of the language of Muslim affinity, which could be utilized or instrumentalized to build collaborative ties, but also to break relations and make the relations hierarchical. So I would just suggest being careful with portraying Islam as the force that unites people automatically. So thirdly and lastly, I want to ask a question on the people who appear as Arab traders or Arab buyers. I think you may do this elsewhere, but as a reader and also out of my own interest, I'd like to more about the characters and itineraries of people who appear as Arab traders or Arab buyers. because at least in the paper, I think there's a tendency to group Arab-speaking long-term residents and sojourners as a single cohort and as Muslims. But they're actually coming from different places like Egypt and Yemen and Iraq and probably others, and they're very different in various actors. So I wonder if you have looked into or plan to explore what EU or China at large represents for them, and how they organize communal activities and relate to local government authorities and interact with other groups of Muslims from South Asia or Pakistan or Afghanistan, for example. And if they actually view themselves as an Arab community, or it's more of how Chinese suppliers or staff or Chinese Muslims view them as a lump sum. So I'll stop there and hand over the floor to the chair, Dr. Chan Kim-kwong. And thank you so much again for the paper and the presentation and for the opportunity to join.
Thank you for your discussions, Zamida, Shukran. And I used to work in MENA regions too for a number of years here. And also, I'd like to know that would Dr. Wen like to respond to Dr. Jeong's comment, or would you like to wait for the floor for more comments or response to feedback? Your voice, please. Your mic.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Jeong. I think I prefer to respond to Dr. Jeong's question and comments. Firstly, I wanted to go back to the third questions, why distinguish the arbitrator's bias, and why I identify them into Arab. Actually, I identify them into Arab business people. This I explained. I didn't explain in my papers. Actually, in the markets, that we all know that these Arab business people, they are from the Middle East and North Africa, from different countries. Just like you mentioned, they are Egypt, they are Jordanese, and different countries. But in the markets, they identify themselves into that Arab business people. In Chinese, they call them 阿拉伯商人, rather than I am Egypt, I am Pakistani. Because in the markets that for Chinese suppliers, they consider these people from these parts, they are the same group. So when they identified into the Arab business people rather than Egypt, it's the more easier for them to communicate with the Chinese suppliers. For other reasons is that actually these are Arab traders, Arab buyers, and Arab business people. They calling this group in this name that because at the beginning, especially in 1980s, when the first 4 Yemenis came to EU, and when they talk to Chinese suppliers, we are from Yemen or from Egypt. That Chinese suppliers, they couldn't distinguish them which country is in the Middle East or North Africa. They identified as I am Arab business people, and then they know, oh, you are Arab business people, rather than which countries. For these reasons, that when there were more business people from these parts, they still consider as the Arab business people. It means that it's convenient for them to talk other people who they are, and then they consider that they didn't distinguish in their subgroup. But when that they communicate with the Chinese people more, and then they also communicate each other in EU, they will identify them into different countries like Egypt or Jordan, like this way. So in these papers, I called them Arab business people on Arab traders, just reasons from reason in these reasons that I mentioned about. But here I also wanted to talk more about the Arab traders are buyers. For my group, that they have the different people who have settled down in EU. They have the different three groups. One group is that they work for their family business. It means they just they are one member of their family business, and they resign by their families to settle down in EU. The second group is the middleman. It means that a lot of them are students who study in China. After their graduation, they choose to live in China rather than going back to their home countries. They work as middlemen because after receiving many years education in China, they can speak Chinese very well, and then the buyers from their countries, they ask them to set up the companies in EU and help these Arab buyers to search goods in the markets. It's not just in EU, but rather than in the whole of China. And then this Arab middleman is the largest group of the Arab business people in China. And the third group is that people, they traveling between China and the Middle East and North Africa frequently. They stayed in EU for 3 or 4 months every year, and they stay in their home countries more time. And then when they bought goods in the markets, after saving out, they came back to EU again and to buy the goods. So the third part group is very small, but they are considered also considered as Arab buyers and the middlemen. This is my response to the third question. And for the second one, and it's related to that the moral issues and religious spaces. Actually, before because I did my field work in 2060. In 2060, it's a very important affair in Zhejiang is that G20 held in Hangzhou. Before that, actually, the religious practice is not very strict in EU. For my informants, because they choose EU as the place to settle down in China, the most important reasons is that EU is more tolerant in religious practice than in other cities in China, according to my informants' information. For the religious spaces, there are different parts. The first part is that I mentioned in my presentations. Some office companies they have run the office in EU. They have the one room or more room for their religious practices. It's allowed. Even though the government know this, is still allowed for them. And the second part is that if there were companies, I mean that companies run by these Arab business people, they can donate the money and then run a special space for their religious practice. They called it 礼拜点. It means that because they prefer to play together. For that one area, it means if there are more than 20 on 30 companies like this, they gather in the very close district, and then these companies they can donate money to run a special space for their religious practice. For the third part is the local mosque. In Yiwu, there is only one mosque for practice. And this mosque had changed their place for 5 times because of the at the beginning it's just when this business Arabs people came to Yiwu, they at the beginning it's earlier than 1990s when they just came to Yiwu, they couldn't find a place to for their play, and so some of the business donates money to run the room for the local restaurants. Local restaurants called red building called Honglou, and then they practice religion play together in these restaurants. Because there are more and more Muslims play both from China and from other countries play here together, and the space is not food enough, not enough for them. Local governments decided to rent a space for these Muslims, and then for these reasons they moved 5 times to different places. This one is also when they doculate these mosque, local governments also spent some money. And in this mosques, the imam in these mosques also employed by local governments. And then they select the people who are suited for this, and it's another topic here. And my response to the second, and for the first one, that you ask maintain the networks between the Chinese, Muslim, and foreign Muslim, and the different networks in local society. Actually, it's very good questions, and these Chinese Muslims, they work as the interpreters. It's not just they are not just translating for these Arab buyers, and they are played a very important role connecting different network in and out of China. For this, because these Chinese Hui interpreters, they is not just because they can speak Arabic language. I mean, because language is just give them opportunity to get the job. But after working as interpreter, they are still needed to connect and choose different networks to maintain that how to do relationships, and how to guide these different people to put them in the right place to maintain this kind and network. And for this, it's resources kept. I mean that resources for different interpreters are totally different. So you can see that because I mentioned that some of interpreters they graduate universities from the Middle East on North Africa, like Egypt. They study there. They have the networks with the with the Egyptian business people, and when they study in Egypt, they familiar business people there, and actually their employment relationships was set when they were students, and these buyers, they just send these Chinese students back to EU and ask them help to set up the network, and the Chinese suppliers, they also just trust these Chinese Hui interpreters rather than the Arab buyers, because for the Chinese suppliers, they believe that believe that it's too far for them to touch with these Arab buyers. But for the Chinese, they can know very exactly which part they are fluent, and even though they disappear in the markets, but they still can touch with their family, other family members in China. So it's different. I don't know whether I respond whether I can answer your questions and your comments. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for the responses to those issues. I'd just like to know that on the floor, would there be anyone who would like to raise some questions and responses, or the discussions with both the main presenter and also the discussants? You can type it in the chat box. And while we are still waiting for people to input their questions, may I like to take the opportunity also to address a couple issues to Dr. Bent. You have done a very intense fieldwork in Yiwu amongst the Arab-speaking merchants. I have two questions, or just not questions, but just responses. In the Yiwu, the market basically touch upon the Muslim world at large, very large part of it is in MENA region, the North Africa, Middle East, North Africa, because MENA region. And within the MENA region, there are several major trading partners with China who have many people stationed in Yiwu, but not Arab speakings, namely the Persians. I mean, from Iran, the Farsis, and the Afghans. They are basically Pashtuns in general. Few speaks Arabic anyways. And also for the Pakistanis, most of them are Urdus rather than Arabs. And are they in the basically, if there's any like Chinese Hui who are basically Arab speakings, were able to break in the language barrier to break into those groups, or are they employ different ones? This is my interesting curiosity, because it's quite a different scene there. And secondly, within the Arab-speaking world in the MENA regions, there's a huge diversity of intensities of Islamic practices. Also, the dialectical differences between, if I can speak, the Jordanians is quite different from the Moroccans. And I guess they're distinctly different from the Yemenis too, even in the Arabic dialects. It's almost like incomprehensible at times. But besides the linguistic thing, because I think they're mostly educated ones, so they speak the so-called the standard Farsi Arabics, the literary ones. But the intensity and the diversity of the Islamic practice, for example, in general, I mean generalities, are much more liberal among the Jordanians versus from the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia is much more restrictive. To what extent do you observe in the fieldwork the different usage or different emphasis on the religion vis-a-vis your research? Do you see the differences, or do you see that this become a point for certain groups of merchants versus the other groups of it? Whether money is the only criteria or much lesser in different groups? Just to things to flow in while we are waiting for others' comments.
Okay, I think I will respond to these questions. It's very good questions, and I also concerned about the questions that because before going to do my field work. I also know that they have the difference, because we all, even though we call it's the Islamic practice, that they are totally different, and actually they are different. But it's very interesting phenomenon is that in EU they didn't distinguish this very clearly, because my informants also told me in my home country we didn't go to the same mosque, and we play in different way, and we are different. But why it becomes not very clearly in EU? I think I can use one of my informants told me that he said because we are coming here to do business rather than practicing religion. So business goes first rather than practicing religions. If we have the very clearly boundaries from different groups, we will have the conflicts with each other, and so we needed to forget this. We are doing business now. We concern more about the business. If you have the different ideas about your religion and what your groups are from and what backgrounds you are different, you can do it privately rather than publicly. So for people, they have different minds in these parts, but they didn't do it on speak out in public, rather than because for example in EU there is only one mosque. You can, it's very interesting when you attend to their plate in Friday, you can see that some people they play in different way in the mosque. So for the other group, they didn't concern a lot about this. I think it's the most important reason is that they, like my informants saying, they are doing business in the city rather than they are practicing religion. And for other reason is that if you have different ideas, you can do it by yourselves rather than you want to do it in group. I think I don't know whether I can explain. It's very clear. Yeah.
Oh yes, it's you're saying that the priority is business and minimize the differences. And what about the first question I raised about the different Islamic groups from the also Islamic Muslims, but from different linguistic or even ethnic compositions? How are they intermixed? If there's any kind of similar Chinese go-between or fixer or interpreters, similar to the Hui Chinese, or the Hui Chinese also play the role of that too.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's there in EU actually. You are right. There are different Islamic that people from different parts. They believe that in Islam. They are from Indonesia and from Afghanistan and the different parts. And I think they, especially from Afghan, I'm have a very good relationships with Afghan businessman. He didn't mention a lot about whether they are, he's different from other Muslims from Indonesia or from Africa or from Middle East. Why? Because their business network is not just focused on Afghan. For example, this Afghan businessman, he have the business relationships with Iran, with Iraq, and so I think you are more emphasized on the religion, but for these people, and I think business commercial relationships will not mix with their religions, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments from the floor? Any responses? All from Dr. Jeong about the responses to your 3 questions? And do you have any feedback or just elaborations of that?
So I just,
I
Okay.
see,
Yeah.
I think David has.
Oh, David. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So actually, thanks. This is a really incredibly rich and really interesting paper. And I just had one question. You talked about the increasing popularity of female interpreters who are seen as more reliable and not likely to go into starting their own business and so on. But one thing that kind of confused me was in the article, there's some figures about the number of, when they're advertising for interpreters, recruiting interpreters, the number of females that were being recruited was far, 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 far higher than the number of males. So there's only one, on each line, only about one male is being looked for, and mostly are females. So I don't know what does this represent, because that seems to it almost seems to indicate that there aren't very many male interpreters to begin with. So I'm wondering if this is a trend, so that what you're describing with male interpreters is going to finish because now everybody's moving to female interpreters, or is it that always the vast majority have been female interpreters, but then your article is still focusing mostly on the males? Or are these advertisements not representative of the job market, in the sense that most males are being recruited through informal channels without advertising? So I'm just trying to understand what those advertisements actually, what kind of a picture do they tell us about the actual situation?
Okay. Thanks, the very good question. And yes, in my paper, I describe that these Arab entrepreneurs that tend to employ more females than males. And I also saw this kind in different platforms that they just want the females. I didn't give more details in this part. Actually, in EU markets, for the for the interpreters markets, there are the males are far more than the females to search job. It means that the females to search job, it's a very, very small groups for females to work as the interpreters. So because these females, they for their family reasons, after marriages, they will not going to do as interpreters, only very, very small part. And then also these females, that they couldn't speak Arabic very well. So when these companies tend to employ females, it's more difficult for them to search for males. So for these companies, they advertised to employ the females at first, and if they cannot find the females, they choose the males for the other option. Yeah.
Okay, so follow-up question. Why is it that there are so few female interpreters? Because I mean, I've never researched this, but in my observation, for example, among Westerners, like who need interpreters, my observation has been that it seems to me that the majority of the interpreters are actually female. That male interpreters are a little more rare. I mean, this is a very subjective impression, but I do believe that. So why is it that Arab language interpreters, there are so few women getting involved in learning Arabic language and becoming interpreters?
Yeah. In EU markets, actually, there are also many female Muslims, especially Hui Muslims, they work in markets, but they didn't work in Arab buyers or middlemen markets companies, rather than in restaurants and in stores. They are sailors, and they also can speak Arabic. It's not a good as good as the males. And one important reason is that I mentioned in my presentation, they had to spend a lot of time out of office. Because when the Arab buyers come to China, they needed to guide them to different places. Like sometimes they needed to spend 1 month in Guangdong and a whole month in Fujian, or sometimes in Ningbo for 1 week. It's not for these females. They when before their marriage, their family consider it's not very convenient for the young females to work with these Arab buyers, especially they are males. Arab buyers are males, and they work together and spend a lot of time out of the office, and it's not a very and for their reputation, it's not like for if they wanted to marry on something like this, it's not maybe it's not very convenient for them to do this kind of job after their marriages, especially because in EU for the female Muslims, they didn't have a lot of the choice to choose their husband. They still wanted to marry the Hui Muslims, and after that their marriages, because their husbands still needed to travel a lot along the China, and they needed someone at their family to take care their parents and take their children. So I think these reasons the restrict that females to find this kind of the job to work as the interpreters in the market. Yeah.
Okay. Any others who would like to speak out for this session towards our presenters and discussants? You just turn on your mic and raise your hand, whatever means to. Okay. Oh, yes, Dr. Jeong. Yes.
I sort of have a follow-up question on from one of the points that you mentioned, which I found really interesting, which is that some of the Chinese Muslim students who go abroad to study in places like Egypt, they develop their own networks mediating between Egypt and EU. So I've also observed a similar phenomenon when I was doing fieldwork in Saudi Arabia, where there are communities of diaspora Chinese Muslims that graduates or certain graduates of the Islamic University in Medina, many of them would, or the majority of them would not go back to religious schools back in China, but would start their work as translators or businessmen in places like EU. And some of them would even marry into the older Chinese Muslim diaspora community in Saudi Arabia and go between the two parts, between EU and China, between EU and Saudi Arabia. So this is very very transnational and global or transregional, whatever you call it. So I sort of wanted, I'm more familiar with that, but you're focusing more on, I guess, in your interactions between different parts within China, which is also very important. And with Northwest China sort of being perceived as backwards, but predominantly Muslim, And so I guess my question is, if you have observed tensions between Chinese Muslims who have had these different trajectories, international trajectories, and more domestic between Ningxia and coastal China. So are there tensions, or sort of like, to put it more crudely, like a hierarchy, or looking up to people with more international experiences? So for people with more domestic experiences, do they sort of have aspirations to move towards another destination outside China? And how would you characterize the proportion of Chinese Muslims who have had experiences outside and not?
Yeah. In Yiwu, actually, I also follow some students. They graduate from Saudi Arabia, Egypt. I think the situation changes changes a lot now. In 1990s, actually, they some students, they study even after 2000s, at the beginning of 2000s, and some students, they study in language, Arabic language training schools. They have opportunities to get a scholarship from the Saudi Arabic and some Egypt to study abroad. And but now it's it's a bit difficult for them to do this because of something changes, and now they prefer to study like in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and then after graduation, after their graduation, they come back to Yiwu and then set up their business. I think this one very important reason is that policy changes a lot now. Yeah.
I'm just curious, can you just say a bit more policy change? In what particular policy that you refer to that makes such differences?
For one example, it's now if you wanted to apply the visa to visit some countries, it's a bit difficult, and then something something like this. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a very lively discussions, and I just see if there's quick, because we only have one presenter this afternoon. This particular panel, and really have ample of time to go into details. And I really thank you, and thanks Dr. Wen for your presentation, and Dr. Jeong for your lively and very insightful responses, and as a discussion, and the Professor Palmer, you always have very challenging questions to the speakers, and if there's no other questions and responses, let's end the panel at this stage. And thank you all for attending where you are, and we'll be continue the next panel at 6 p.m. Is it? Yes, right. Now we take a break. And thank you very much once again. Thank you for the organizing people at the back of all the arrangements, Valeries and others. Okay, and have a nice break. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks a lot
for being the
Thank you. Thank you.